right, guys. Yeah, we are all set on this end, so I hope everybody has a wonderful show, and Kyle is your guide for everything cues. Hold on a second, yes. And Stephanie is not actually going live, so we should be all right.
than 85 years, SEFCU has encouraged you to dream big and become part of something bigger. From purchasing your first home to providing for those that matter most and supporting people in need, we're always here and always happy to help. Convenient services, great rates, no maintenance fees, supportive employees, and a steadfast commitment to community are what makes SEFCU a fantastic credit union and a neighbor you can always count on. Visit SEFCU.com and join today. SEFCU, changing lives every day.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 16th Annual Women Against MS event. My name is Ashley Miller. I'm a sports reporter at WNYT News Channel 13 in Albany, and this is my very first Women Against MS event. I'm so honored to be with you this afternoon live as we raise funds to stop MS in its tracks. You just heard from one of our Mission Moment partners this year, SEFCU. We also want to thank the Times Union for coming in as a Mission Moment partner. Because of your support over the years, this event has raised more than $1 million to create a world free of MS. We want to hear from all of you in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from today and what moves you throughout our program this afternoon. And also keep your cell phones handy and make sure you're registered for updates. You can register by texting 2021, that's 2021 WAMS to 76278. That's 2021 WAMS with no space to 76278, or visit www.2021wams.givesmart.com. And don't forget about those fabulous purses being auctioned off. They're really nice. We're going to hear more about those and how those designer handbags became a staple at this event in just a little bit. You can check them out and bid on the website or straight from your phone by texting the item number and the amount of your bid to 76278. We want to thank all of our 2021 sponsors. You'll find out more about the many people and organizations who've made today's event possible a little bit later on in the program. We're looking forward to our event that includes keynote speaker Meredith O'Brien, a special video honoring the Cindy Martin Fighting Spirit Award, and a research update from Dr. Appleby and Dr. Parada. A big thank you to our WAMS event planning committee, especially Susan Radzaminski, committee chair and National MS Society trustee, and Christine Sisto Murtis, WAMS Capital Region founder and society trustee. Now let's hear from Susan and Christine. Ladies.
Thanks, Ashley. And it's wonderful to welcome you to your first WAMS. Of course, this will be a great event, but not anything can replace the in-person. Right now, we'd be having chocolate-covered strawberries, mimosas. We'd be gawking at those awesome purses. And we cannot wait to bring everybody back in person. But out of the abundance of caution, we are virtual again this year. Next year, however, Christine and I are committed to bringing everyone back together, and we are going to have one heck of a reunion with so many friends and sponsors.
That's so true, Susan. Hello, everybody. We miss you. Welcome to the 19th annual WAMS event.
One of my favorite jobs as chairs is to recognize our terrific sponsors. And boy, oh boy, they have blown me away this year. You know, I was really nervous when we decided to go virtual again in terms of how we would bring back our sponsors, but they came back believing in our mission in full force and gave even more. They've been so gracious. Our sponsors and everyone giving to the MS Society in support of our event today is believing in our vision to create a world free of MS. The National MS Society has accomplished so much, but there's still work to be done. There is no cure for MS, and not everyone with MS has a treatment that works. People with progressive forms are still largely without multiple treatment options. So many millions of people are counting on us today. The funds we raise today could fuel that next big research breakthrough. And there have been many in recent years. When I was diagnosed with MS, there were no treatments. Today, there are multiple treatments and more holistic approaches to treating MS. I look forward to hearing about this progress in the research update later in our program. And because of this progress, I strongly believe that we will see an end to MS in my lifetime. So now, Christine, let's go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsors. Let's thank them for the generosity that they have shown us to the National MS Society to help us move one step closer to a world free of MS.
You got that right, Susan.
Our mission moment partners this year are SEFCU and the Times Union. We want to thank SEFCU for not only being a sponsor, but for helping us to create a video to recognize the creation of the Fighting Spirit of Cindy Martin Award to be featured later in our event. We made the decision to postpone presenting the award until we can be in person again. But in the meantime, you can learn about the award and help to nominate deserving candidates to be considered for this award next year when we are in person. Thank you, SEFCU, for your support of our mission and for helping to share Cindy's story. We'd also like to thank the Times Union for their continued support of WAMS and for advertising this event.
You're definitely going to want to bring your Kleenex because you're going to need it for the next mission moment video. We want to really thank all of our wonderful Hope partners. That's CNS Companies and Bristol Myers Squibb. Thank you.
And then we want to, of course, thank our celebrities partners, KeyBank, BST, Christine Mertis, plus her wonderful company, Magical Moments Vacations, M&T Bank, St. Peter's Hospital, and Waldron's Walkers. Yes, thank you, Karen and Sylvia, for making that happen. And before we recognize our other sponsors, Christine, let's take a walk down memory lane and share one of my favorite stories about what inspired you to start WAMS in the Capital Region.
It is actually really hard to believe that it was more than 15 years ago when I first put pen to paper and started drafting a budget and some financial goals for WAMS. The event was happening in other parts of the country, but it wasn't happening here in New York State. And I really couldn't understand why, with so many talented and professional women in our community, why had WAMS not made its way into our area? So I called every female go-getter that I know in the Capital Region, and I said, I have a favor to ask, but I promise that it will be one of the most rewarding things that you do all year. We're going to initiate an event for women, an event about women, and we're going to show this disease what we can do as women when we come together to fight a cause. And so it began all those years ago that a group of 12 of us created the first WAMS luncheon with nearly 300 women in attendance at Wolfert's Roof's Country Club. I bet some of you online today still remember that. And today, that legacy actually lives on. By the way, I think, and Ashley brought it up before, that one of the most creative things that we started back then was the person accessory auction. And I hope that everybody who's watching today will bid on some of the designer bags. This is your chance to own beautiful bags like Michael Kors, Kate Spade, Rebecca Minkoff, Coach. And the best part is 100% of the proceeds goes to the National MS Society so that we can raise funds for critical research that I know you guys want us doing. So look how far we've come in terms of treatments in just the last 5 years alone. So with the holidays coming up, if you're thinking of purchasing a gift for someone special or you're looking to buy a bag for yourself, don't buy it on Amazon, guys, when you can be supporting a great cause like the National MS Society. So now that I've given my plug for the auction, let's get back to thanking the people and the businesses in our community that have helped us here today. And we're going to start with our media sponsors who've been with us from the start. That's, as Susan mentioned before, Times Union. I want to thank them again, and all my wonderful friends at News Channel 13.
You know, Christine, I bet we're bidding against the same purses again this year. That was one of the favorite things I loved at the competition about who's going to win that purse.
Don't even think about it.
But I'm so grateful that you started WAMS in the Capital Region. And you know what? It's just so funny. I just recently learned about how WAMS started. And I don't know if you've heard the story or not.
No, I haven't actually. Tell us.
So 75 years ago, a woman by the name of Sylvia Lowry placed an ad in the New York Times after her brother began experiencing problems with his sight and his balance. The ad asked that anyone who had recovered from MS to respond. Well, instead of information about a possible treatment or a cure for her brother, she received dozens of responses from people in the same situation. That's when Sylvia realized there was a need for an organized effort to find an effective treatment for MS. What began as a one-woman's vision, the original Woman Against MS, is now a nationwide organization leading a global effort to raise critical funds for this research.
My gosh, what an incredible inspiration, and what a great way for us to try to continue in the legacy of what Sylvia started 75 years ago and what we started just 16 years ago. And so we thank our benefactor partners. That includes Albany Med, Berkshire Hathaway, MVP Healthcare, Inspire Confidence Group, Price Chopper Supermarkets and Market 32, and Sanofi Genzyme.
And thank you to our corporate honorary committee partners. This would not be the premier event without all of you.
Thank you so much, Susan and Christine, for all that you do for the society year after year after year. You both are an inspiration. And don't forget to get those bids in for these fabulous purses that they talked about. Again, you can register by visiting www.2021wams.givesmart.com or simply text 2021-WAMS to 76278. Now we're going to hear from Stephanie Coons, Upstate New York's chapter president for the past 11 years and with the Society for a whopping 40 years. Steph?
Thank you, Ashley, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Every one of us has the power to achieve breakthroughs, uncover solutions, and help create a world free of MS. What began with one woman's vision and commitment is today a 50-state network leading a global charge to create a world free of MS. We have paved the way for all of the nearly 20 treatment options available today, none of which existed 30 years ago. We have brought the world together to set standards for diagnosing MS quickly and accurately, and to crystallize the distinction between relapsing remitting and progressive MS. We have uncovered the role of immune cells in disease progression and treatment, and the possibilities of restoring function through myelin repair and nervous system rewiring. We have funded over 1,000 early career researchers who have since been behind nearly every major breakthrough in treatment. We have driven billions of dollars in federal research funding on state level reforms for quality respite services and home modification tax credits, and ensured that the voice of those with MS is always heard in courtrooms, boardrooms, where we fight for access and affordability. In media, where we tell our stories, and in the halls of power, we make our needs known. We have built a network of resources and events that help people affected by MS live less isolated, more informed, happier lives. Whether that means one newly diagnosed person finding the education program they need online, 50,000 people benefiting from the in-depth personalized support of MS navigators, or 300,000 people stepping forward to walk MS each and every year. This is what's possible when we put the voices and needs of people affected by MS first, convene people and catalyze progress on a global scale, and make the most strategic use of every dollar our movement raises. A recent study funded by the National MS Society has confirmed that nearly 1 million people are living with MS in the United States, more than twice the original estimate. This breakthrough helps us better understand the disease and its impact. With twice as many people living with MS, solutions for MS are now twice as important. Until we end this disease forever, we will do whatever it takes to accelerate breakthrough. Whether you are one of 1 million people living with MS, or you want to make a difference for someone who is, we need you to join us. I'm so glad you're here. It will take all of us and more to achieve a world free of MS. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that those impacted by MS are lucky to have you championing a cure. Now I want to introduce our Mission Moment video brought to us by Mission Moment partner CEFCU. As Susan and Christine mentioned, get those tissues ready, my friends.
She loved life. She was joyful. She was always joyful. Was always giving of herself, put herself often last in order to make life better for others. She adored her family and her grandchildren, and certainly her husband, the love of her life.
When I first met Cindy, she had just finished a fundraising event for her alma mater, Catholic High. She's part of the phone-a-thon where they would contact alumni and beg them for money. And she was a hard person to say no to, so she was very good at her job. And when we met, it was an outside event, and she told me what she did, and I said, well, they don't know how to find me. They keep calling my mother's house. So next day I had a note in the mail, I found you, you can't hide anymore. And we went out after that, and the very first date she told me I have this illness. I didn't know anything about it.
She was diagnosed in her mid to late 20s with MS. And I remember one episode where she couldn't see very well. And when I think about Cindy's journey with MS from the very beginning, when she was in her mid-20s, running, legs started dragging, couldn't quite figure out what was wrong, and watching this progression in how it kind of slowly stole her independence and then her life, she never complained.
Her whole goal was to raise money to help other people that needed it. She was very active, a volunteer, which would physically drain her for weeks, but that was her mission in life.
You know, she was very involved with the MS Society as a volunteer and also helping other individuals who were diagnosed to help them to kind of navigate their care and be supportive to them. So again, even though she had her own thing, just always was willing to reach out to help other people and to help smooth their path based upon some of the experiences she may have had.
Kathy called me to let me know what they had planned and asked if I thought it would be okay. I said, are you crazy? Of course it would be okay. Her family, I didn't need to check with them, but I did, just to make sure everybody was on board with it. And they were all honored that people thought enough of her to do that.
To have an award named after her, the Fighting Spirit Award, means so much to my entire family. I think she would be so proud, but so humble to know that this was happening. I hope that as other people see this award and hear about this award, that they're inspired to first and foremost get behind the MS Society as they work to try to find a cure, but also remember that they're not alone. That there are other people who have gone before them that have hopefully paved a little bit of an easier way.
Wow, that video really says it all. Please give it up to CEFCU for creating this touching video. Really amazing. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to view this fantastic event. My name is Gregory Cushman. On behalf of my mother and our entire family, we send our sincere thanks to the National MS Society for creating the Cindy Martin Fighting Spirit Award in her honor. So many fond memories of my mother demonstrate courage, strength, and spirit daily. Throughout this time, she was positive. She never used MS as an excuse to take the easy road. She was always smiling, laughing, pushing through whatever challenges she encountered. 10 years ago, my mother used a walker to get around. I just celebrated my 10th wedding anniversary this year. At my wedding 10 years ago, it was time for the parent dances. I walked to her seat. She stood up with her walker, pushed it out of the way, and walked to the center of the dance floor, and we danced. She used every bit of energy she had. At that moment, she shared with me her only goal was to stand and dance without her walker in front of everybody. I was truly proud of her, and it's a moment I'll never forget. My mother, Cindy, battled MS. I witnessed the progression and the challenge she faced daily for a good portion of my life. I recall her weight changing rapidly, difficulty standing, limping, leg spasms, just to name a few. I see this progression beyond my mother. My neighbor lives across the street, is battling MS. She walks her dog around the neighborhood. Some days she has to skip. Some days she walks at a slower pace, limping, or her right leg is not bending. That was my mother 20 plus years ago. I also have a young man, 19 years old, who works on my team, who is just diagnosed with MS. He has symptoms, and occasionally he has to call off. And when he does, I don't need him to explain. I understand it. These are everyday activities we take for granted. Standing up, opening a jar, seeing, remembering what you're doing, or simple, essential functions of the body. I believe together we can help those like my neighbor continue to walk her dog around the neighborhood, or that young 19-year-old gentleman I mentioned before. With your help, he can walk his mother to the dance floor on his wedding day. Finding a cure will take courage, support, and sacrifice, just like I saw in my mother. But I do believe it's possible if we join together and raise money for a cure. Thank you for allowing me to be here today, keeping my mother's memory alive, and thank you for raising money to help those affected by MS.
That was truly moving, and Cindy clearly had a fighting spirit and leaves behind certainly an inspiring legacy. Thank you to Greg and to the entire Martin family for being with us today and for sharing Cindy's story. And what a special day we'll have to look forward to next year when we're able to present the Cindy Martin Fighting Spirit Award in person. We can't wait for that. Now, we want to recognize our event supporters at the honorary committee member level. What an impressive and long list that you see on your screen there that committed at this level. We have a goal of raising $10,000 today toward our vision of a world free of MS. And every donation matters, no matter how big or how small. When you think about the impact, consider these things. $2,500 sends one research fellow to the Society's MS Research Fellows Conference to help launch the career of the next great MS research leader. $1,000 makes a vehicle more accessible to help someone living with MS maintain their independence. $500 provides up to 3 months of in-person counseling services to someone living with MS. Such an important service. More than half of the people living with MS have disease-related depression, and the MS Society is doing everything possible to address this issue. $250 provides dedicated support from an MS navigator, a specially trained social worker to address their unique MS needs. Again, no matter how big or small. We'd like to thank several people already who have made donations. Thank you to Susan Lovelace for your $500 donation. It means so much. Thank you to Christine Gregory for your $250 donation. Thank you to Jennifer Hollick for your $250 donation. You can see on your screen here, we're trying to get to $10,000. Thank you to Patricia Carl for $50. No amount too big or too small, people. Today, we're all here for a united cause. Again, thanks to Christine for her $250 donation. And anonymous, you can do it anonymously. That's the beauty of this. If you don't want your name said, we won't say it. Contribute anonymously. Thank you to Allison Watson Maston for her $50 donation. We're up to $3,970, so keep it coming. Thank you to Jennifer Hennian for her $10 donation. We appreciate it all. Again, text 2021 WAMS to 76278, and you can give on our Give Smart page as well. We are trying to reach that $10,000 mark today. And you know what? One of our generous WAMS supporters, Julia Cummins, is going to match every dollar from the $8,000 point up. So let's get to $8,000. We're at $4,970 right now. Thank you to Kathy Lanny. Kathy Lanny for the $1,000 donation. We saw her in that beautiful video. Thank you, Kathy. And of course, the inspiring memory of her sister, Cindy. Thank you to Patricia Carl again for her $50 donation. Again, once we hit that $10,000 mark, we don't want to stop there. We want you to keep on giving. $10,000 is just our baseline. Let's go above and beyond. So that way we can set the bar even higher when we come in person next year. We're up over 5,000. Thank you to Christine Wheat. We appreciate your donation. Kyle Radzaminski, $120 from Kyle. I have a feeling he's related to Susan. Kyle, good one. Thank you to so much everyone who's already donated, anyone who continues to donate. This will stay open until tomorrow, so please continue the donations as we go on with your program. We really appreciate your support. People with MS need us now more than ever. And you guys, all of you are making that next breakthrough possible. Thank you to Kevin Espinoza, $100. We're up to $5,540. Again, anonymous, $250. We don't care if you want to put your name on it or not. Put your name on it, don't, that's okay. Andrea Worthington, thank you for your $50 donation. Please keep them coming. We've got a lot more to go. Miriam Duchesne, thank you for your $100 donation. Every little bit counts. We're up to 55, 56, 60. It's still going up. And again, once we hit that $8,000 mark, we've got Julia Cummins is going to match every single dollar from that point up to $1,000. So that means everyone who donates from that point on is going to have their donation doubled. So let's hit that $8,000 mark and go on from there. Next up, I'd like to introduce, we'll go back to this and we'll check in on it later. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. Meredith O'Brien is a Boston area writer, a Northeastern University faculty member, and the author of four books. Her latest book, called Uncomfortably Numb, a memoir, is called A Triumphant Story of Determination and Resiliency. It chronicles her life-altering multiple sclerosis diagnosis, and she speaks openly about her personal experience living with a chronic disease and her approach to persevering while life continues to throw curveballs, like a pandemic, and her tools for coping and overcoming. She wants to share her story to inspire others to keep moving forward.
Hello, everyone. I'm Meredith O'Brien, and I'm really honored to be able to be here today to speak with you. I wanted to give many thanks to Stephanie Kunis for inviting me to speak with you today. I've given a lot of thought to the theme for today's event, which is push forward, push through, never give up. And this is an idea that I've been working to implement since I was first diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS in July 2014. I've been on a 7-year, I guess you'd call it a pursuit, to try to reach a kind of peace with my MS, with its symptoms, and with the way it has changed my life. I wanted to share with you a story about something that happened to me this past September. So I was on Cape Cod with my husband and my college friends, and I woke up on a Sunday really early in the morning, and I was experiencing symptoms that I knew weren't anything related to food poisoning or colds. I kind of knew it was MS. I had a lot of my telltale signs, my MS migraines with the eye pain, vision impairment, pain in my head when I shifted it from side to side, nausea, fatigue. And at 2 a.m. that day, I knew I was going to have one of those MS days. And MS, much to my chagrin, doesn't care. If I had made plans with my husband and my friends to go to the beach and enjoy one of the final crisp New England beach days after a summer of having to hide inside because of heat sensitivity, MS didn't care that I had a Zoom meeting scheduled later that day. But why would MS care? It's not a living, thinking thing. It's a condition. And I just impatiently waited for all the symptoms to pass. And I should probably underscore that impatiently waited part, because I was really irritated with what MS had done, with the damage that MS had done to my brain and spinal cord, that it ruined my plans yet again. MS even ruined the first couple of days of a family trip to Paris. I'd never been to Paris, and my daughter had just finished a semester abroad, and I wound up having to spend the first 2 days in bed because I had MS symptoms. I can make plans, and those plans will be scuttled by multiple sclerosis, and I can't really rely on those plans. And I like to know what to expect. I'm not a big fan of surprises. And when MS symptoms pop up out of nowhere, it's something that makes me a little crazy. When talking about me, my husband, Scott, likes to refer to the famous New York movie, When Harry Met Sally. He likes to quote, "You're high maintenance, but you think you're low maintenance." And he says, yep, that applies definitely to you, especially when my plans get changed at the last minute. And it's taken me a long time to figure out how to deal with my MS, and one of the things that makes me feel like I'm in sort of control is that I try to engineer good days. I know I need to avoid hot and humid weather. I know that I need to continue to take the medications, which keep the disease from progressing. I have medications for symptoms that I always keep on hand. I feel like my purse is loaded down with all of those medications. But on that Sunday morning I talked about just a little bit ago, when I was stuck in the house and my friends and my husband were at the beach, I felt a little sorry for myself. I was angry that MS had swooped in and stopped me from enjoying one of the last beach days of the season. And I was just angrily lying on the couch, waiting for it to pass. But eventually it did pass. Eventually I felt better. I weathered that bad MS day, and we all have those bad MS days. And that is something I have to keep reminding myself, that we all have those days and that they will pass. Being able to accept where we are right now in our MS journey is a constant, ongoing effort, especially because our diseases change over time. We get new symptoms or different things affect us. And there's a shifting new normal that we have to deal with, and that can be frustrating. Like, sometimes I learned that I need to use certain disability aids to be able to get through my shifting new normal. For example, I use a disabled parking placard when it's hot and humid or when I need to conserve energy. Some people might use other disability aids like canes or scooters or chairs, and I have these ugly cooling vests, which I use to help with my heat sensitivity. And it's just a tool, like all the other tools, to help me adjust to my new normal. Like, I need to work up the courage to use my disabled parking placard. And I give myself a little pep talk saying, it's okay. It'll help me do what I need to do. It'll be okay. When I want to go, say, to a Red Sox game, earlier this summer when it wasn't too hot, I went to a game and I had brought my cooling vest, and it's really ugly. And I was just like, just put it on. Nobody cares. Live your life. Just go. But the most important lesson I've learned, I need to stop being angry about my body betraying me. That's kind of how I view it, my body betraying me. And I have to be kinder to it. Be kinder to it in that it's been damaged by this disease, but it's gotten me here. Like, I'm speaking to you now. I've been able to write books. I've been able to have kids. This body has given and received comfort and love, and it's imperfect, but we're kind of stuck with one another. So I need to be nicer to it. Now, at the end of the memoir that I wrote about my MS experience, called Uncomfortably Numb, the last scene, I'll spoil the last scene for you. It was about the publication of another book, so it seems kind of meta. Because when I was diagnosed with MS, I was in the middle of working on a book where I had shadowed a middle school jazz band for a year after one of its members died unexpectedly. And I was going to write a book about how the music, and the charismatic music teacher, Mr. Clark, helped the kids deal with their grief. And I wasn't sure after my initial diagnosis, with all the tumult of that I would be able to finish the book, that I would be able to get it published. And I finally did. And at the end of my memoir, I talk about the book launch party for that book that I was so afraid MS would have taken away from me. And I was really concerned that my MS symptoms would crop up and ruin the book party for me. And it was a party where the jazz band played, and I gave a speech. I was supposed to give a speech, and Mr. Clark was supposed to give a speech. And I was really worried about whether or not MS would betray me, or my body would betray me in that moment. So I'm going to read a little bit from that last scene about the book party. I do not fumble my speech. I do not slur my words. I do not faint. My knees do not buckle. No one has to pick me up off the floor like they did when I was taken to the hospital by ambulance during a severe MS attack. I am flying. I do not need to rely on the written speech, as I already know it in my heart. I am radiating uncharacteristic elation from my spot on the side of the room after the middle school jazz band musicians complete their 4 pieces. When I feel Mr. Clark grabbing my right hand firmly in his left as he pulls me in front of the band. He sweeps his arms like a game show host toward me, encouraging the crowd to applaud. Momentarily horrified and stunned, I'm a bashful schoolgirl standing there, uncertain what I should do with my hands. Mr. Clark, in his bright cornflower blue shirt, extends his arms and moves in for a bear hug. I hug him back and allow the warmth of everything, the warmth, to sink down to my bones. In that moment, I am not afraid of the warmth. It is sustaining me. Now, if there's something I could leave you with today, it's my wish that we could all give ourselves permission to take the time and the space that we need to process whatever MS may bring us, and that we're gentle with ourselves as we try to move forward and really experience and enjoy the moments of our lives. It is my sincerest hope that you all find the warmth and the patience and the kindness to sustain you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Meredith, for sharing your story. Your courage, your warmth, and your kindness are certainly palpable. And with that, I want to remind all of you to get those bids in for those fabulous purses. Listen, the holidays are around the corner. Christmas, buy it for yourself, for God's sakes. Buy it for your friends, your girlfriends, your moms, your sisters. Your donations and you buying those purses, bidding on those purses, helps to get us one step closer to stopping MS from impacting another child, another mother, father, sister, or friend. So please get in there, bid on those purses. We've got a lot of beautiful stuff, and help us raise money. And another note now, Julia Cummings will be matching all gifts up to $1,000. So get your donations in right now. Don't wait. We're up to $8,430. Thank you to Meredith. We just heard from Meredith, and now she's donating $150 to the cause. Thank you, Meredith. Go out and get her book. Read it. I'm sure we can learn a lot. $1,250 from an anonymous donor. Thank you, whoever you are out there, for helping us reach our goal. Thank you to Christine again. We're up to $8,430. Again, our goal is $10,000 today. Thank you to Gregory Cushman. We also heard from him. He donated $200. Thank you, Gregory. Miriam Duchesne, $100. Our goal is $10,000 today, but we don't want to stop there. This is open until tomorrow. Thank you to Allison Watson Maston for her $50 donation. To register, text 2021 WAMS to 76278. You can also go to our Give Smart page. Thank you to Corey Radzaminski for his $100 donation. We are up to $8,530. Thank you to Kim Miller for her $100 donation. No relation to me, but we appreciate it, Kim. Thank you to Christine Wheat Malice. I believe we thanked her already, $25. Again, there is no donation too big or too small. If it's $5, if it's $10, any amount you can give will help us get to that $10,000 goal. Thank you to Romaldo Scotto De Carlo for his donation. Love the name, and I love that you challenged me live on the air to say it. Thank you again, $120 anonymous donations, back-to-back anonymous donations. We're up to $8,530. Miriam Duchesne again, go bid on those purses. Those purses will also go towards our goal. 100% of those profits will go towards the goal that we have set forth today. This is open until tomorrow, both here and for the purses as well. Thank you to Christine Murtis. She's up there. Thank you, Christine, for your $120 donation. Thank you to Allison Watson for her $50 donation. We're up to $8,500, people. We want to get to 10,000. Let's do it before we go off the air. We don't want to leave today knowing that maybe we might come up short. We don't want to come up short. Let's help tackle MS right now. We're up to $8,630. Thank you to Andrea Worthington for her $50 donation. Keep those donations coming in. No amount too big or too small. $500 from Susan Lovelace. We thanked her at the beginning of the show. We can't thank you enough, Susan. We'll thank you again for that $500 donation. Cassidy Chanik, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Thank you for your donation. What a story from Meredith. We hope that you are being inspired today by the people that we have talking here. Again, we can't wait to be in person next year to present that Cindy Martin Award. But until then, let's make this virtual event as good as we can make it. Susan Radzaminski, $2,220. Thank you, Susan. Linda Austin, $120. You guys are crushing it. Let's keep on going. Patricia Carl, $50. We want to get to that $10,000 mark by the end of our show here. And again, this window is open until tomorrow. So don't stop and get your bids in on those purses. To wrap things up here, we have a little more to go. Don't go anywhere on us yet. Keep those donations coming in as we go. We're up to $8,880, $50 from another anonymous donation. Ellie Inglesby, $1,000. That's a huge chunk. That gets us so close, Ellie. And again, Julia Cummins is going to be matching all gifts up to $1,000. So get your donations in right now. We want to hit that $10,000 goal. Thank you to Jennifer Hollick for her $250 donation. We do have a research update. We're up to $9,130. You guys are killing it. $100 from Susan. Thank you, Susan Corney. Thank you, John Farrick, for your $250 donation. Guys, we're going to hit that 10,000. You don't want to hear me talk anymore. If you don't want to hear me talk anymore and you want that research update, let's get to 10,000. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on talking. So let's get us there. Romaldo, thank you again for your $30 donation. We're up to $9,130. And we're just a little bit away from that update that I know you want to hear from some very qualified professionals. So help me get to that $10,000 mark that we would love to hit and go beyond. We'll check back in on that. Right now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that update that we're going to give you. Our research update today comes from Dr. Angela Apple. And knowledge among members, disseminates information to the healthcare community and to persons affected by MS. So what a special treat it is to hear from them fresh after they had attended this. Dr. Appleby and Dr. Parada took the time to share with us about the current state of MS and hot topics in the MS community, such as MS and COVID-19, diagnosis criteria, research and treating MS, and so much more. Their full update will be viewed in just a few minutes as the final piece of our program and will last approximately 20 minutes. As you've heard throughout our program today, we've never been closer to finding a cure, and together we've achieved more breakthroughs for MS than the world has seen for any other neurological disease. On behalf of the National MS Society, thanks to our committee, all our sponsors today, and all of you for your support. It's not too late to get those donations in. Let's go. Get your bids in. The holidays are coming fast. Oh, look at that. Look at that number. Give yourselves and the confetti. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was our goal today. And then we're not stopping there. I told you we can't stop there. That's our $10,000 goal. Of course, congratulations to all of you. Thank you for all of you for your support. But we don't want to stop there. John Farrick, thank you for your $250 donation. We want to keep going. That's just the baseline. Let's crush that $10,000 goal. It's not too late to get those donations in. Don't go retail for those purses. You can get a purse out of this too. You bid, the money goes to a great cause, and you come home with a new Kate Spade, a new Michael Kors, you name it, we've got it. So consider bidding on one of those fabulous designer purses in our auction today. The auction will remain open until, this says Monday, November 8th. If I was wrong, I apologize, at 5 p.m. The recording of our virtual event will be available on YouTube also, and will be linked on the 2021 wams.givesmart.com website. So feel free to share with your friends, please. We would appreciate it, and your family who missed our show today. And you can always still donate. It's not too late. As we close out our program, I'm excited to announce the National MS Society is uniting our 16 luncheons across the country under one brand, Together for a Cure MS Luncheon. This means next year's event will be called Together for a Cure Upstate New York. It's a bold new name, but our commitment to bring women together to help each other remains unchanged. I hope you'll make plans to join us. Women living with MS need us to continue this tradition until we wipe MS out. Thank you again for joining us, for your generosity, for helping us hit our goal. Please stay safe. We hope to see you next year in person. And now, that full research update from Drs. Appleby and Parada.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for another year of WAMS. We're excited to get together at some point again, but Dr. Parada and I today are going to cover the current state of MS, which is hopefully going to cover all the meetings, papers, and research that we've come across over the last year in the field of MS. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. You guys are all seeing this again for the second time. We saw this last year if you attended. The course of MS has really been improved by the earlier diagnosis, the increased availability of the disease-modifying therapies we have now. With the advent of the MRI and more frequent imaging, as well as the recognition of the importance of MS, it's been led to further diagnosis earlier. And so the treatment has been instituted earlier, which has led to less disease on MRI, less disease in the brain, and hopefully less disability. And part of this process of earlier diagnosis and treatment is the diagnostic criteria that have been developed over the years. These started really around 2010 and have been revised as recently as December 2017 in Lancet. I won't make you guys read this busy slide, but what's really happened is that we've made it available for neurologists based on a single MRI to make the diagnosis of MS based on certain criteria. Often it has to be in conjunction with the clinical presentation as well. But basically the importance is that providers recognize that there's two attacks separated in time, as well as two areas of the nervous system involved in the diagnosis of MS. And that's what these criteria led to. To give you a better example of this, I've included MRIs today. The McDonald criteria really say that they have to be lesions or areas in the brain that are associated with areas we know are common with MS. So on the top left there, you see gadolinium enhancement. In the brain, contrast should never be there. If it isn't there, it means it's transferred from the blood stream across the blood-brain barrier due to inflammation or injury and led to enhancement, which is the top left picture there. This means there's active inflammation occurring right where you see the contrast, and means that the immune system has caused damage within the brain. The middle sequence you see here is a T2 hyperintensity. You can see the spots on the screen there. This particular sequence is a scrapbook of the brain that we use over time. So each subsequent MRI a patient has, we'll compare this particular sequence, slicing up and down to look for anything new, which I'm going to show you on a further slide. Infratentorial means below the the base of the brain and involving the brainstem. And here you can see the two on either side of the brainstem. Juxtacortical means towards the top of the brain, which is the bottom left. Periventricular is around the spinal fluid, or the ventricles there. And then in the spinal cord, you can slightly see that one there roughly at C7. So the McDonald criteria not only look for the clinical examples of MS, but also lesions that are in classic areas of the brain that are affected by MS, because spots can occur in the brain that are not MS in other locations. And so these criteria help bring together the clinical presentation of a patient and MRI presentation, and in some situations allow single diagnosis at one point in time rather than watching people over time. Often we have to watch over time because still the clinical presentation of a patient takes precedence over everything else. And if you have no symptoms but the MRI, we may need to follow it over time, which really leads to the application of the data here. So this is a patient's baseline MRI. On the top, you see the T2 sequence, which is the one I say we track over time, looking to see if there's changes. On the bottom, we're looking for active inflammation. Patient doesn't maybe have the correct clinical presentation. The MRI doesn't fit all the criteria, so they're not diagnosed. Instead, they have an MRI 3 months later. And on this repeat MRI, you see the developments there on the right of new lesions on the T2, and not only new lesions on the T2, but actual inflammation and enhancement on the bottom right. This patient now with application of the McDonald criteria can be diagnosed with MS based on MRI changes over 3 months rather than waiting for another clinical attack. I would say that it's important to always have the clinical picture in context with the MRI because of the criteria coming about and thus recognizing MS sooner. This has led to some overdiagnosis of MS. And at times here in the MS Center, we're having to undiagnose patients with things like migraine or some other illness that actually caused the lesions rather than MS. Moving on to the immune system, a lot at the meeting we just came back from the consortium was about manipulating different areas of the immune system with a different disease-modifying therapy that I'm going to talk about further. The immune system can really be broken down to the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system is the body's really first line of defense. It's the first and frontline warriors that are out there trying to non-specifically protect the body against harmful agents like viruses and bacteria and respond immediately. It's really non-specific attack, but it's geared to try to keep you from getting ill. The adaptive immune system is made of both B and T cells. And these respond to innate cells and remove and destroy bacteria that's been presented to them over weeks to days to try and protect the body. And what can happen with B and T cells is because they're second line warriors, they gain a memory of having attacked this virus or bacteria before. And in doing so, when you're exposed to it again, can protect you. This is a B cell. When I was in fellowship and early on in my MS career, a lot of the focus of treatments of MS were on T cells because T cells can directly attack the myelin. But the last 10 years now, we've recognized the importance of this other part of the adaptive immune system, which is the B cell, because the B cell can produce cytokines that promote inflammation. It can present antigens to the T cells to directly attack. It can regulate the actual immune system and be anti-inflammatory instead of pro-inflammatory, and it can also make antibodies. So the B cell is more of a cascade of effect than the T cells that directly attack, which really has led us to these recent B cell therapies that we've seen develop in the last 10 years, and on to the next slide I'm going to talk about. It's important to cover B cell life cycle in general. This is a busy slide, but it's really to show you the gamut of B cells there are. There aren't just simply one type of B cell. There's stem cells that are in your bone marrow all the way to plasma cells that make your antibodies. And in the middle, and I try to compare this slide to stem cells being your immature babies at home, your plasma cells being your elderly sitting out in the communities that are wise. And the middle B cells here are the adolescent B cells that can run amok. And the gamut of these B cells are what we have to manipulate, if you will, to try to control MS. A lot of the therapies right now that we have remove those adolescent B cells, but now there is a new type of B cell that's being developed, or new type of therapy to affect B cells that's being developed. And this is kind of a cool story of something bad turning into something good. Back in 1993, it was discovered that there's certain patients that had immunodeficiency syndrome, which meant they didn't have B cells that were functioning correctly in the bloodstream. Their bone marrow made good normal B cells, but their bloodstream didn't have these high functioning B cells. And Ogden Bruton in 1993 discovered that it was because of a deficiency in the BTK gene, or Bruton tyrosine kinase gene, which led to these B cells not developing correctly from bone marrow. And because of this, they didn't function correctly in the bloodstream. Well, here we are now in 2021, and we're using this bad thing for good, in that we're trying to manipulate this BTK gene. And by doing so, by using inhibition of BTK, we can actually remove harmful B cells that are out there in the bloodstream and leave the others that are doing their job and doing it well alone. So if you will, it's removing the pro-inflammatory B cells that can attack things that they shouldn't be attacking. It's removing those and leaving those that can protect you alone. And you saw that gamut of B cells I described, so you can understand that there's different types there in the system. These are being developed right now. They're not FDA approved. They're still in phase 2 and 3 trials. But the exciting thing is they're being studied in both progressive, relapsed remitting, and primary progressive forms of MS, which is exciting for many because right now we don't have much to offer for the primary progressive population. I'm going to attempt to say the names of the 3 that are in clinical trials. Tolebrutinib, evobrutinib, and fenebrutinib are all in different phases of trials with different population bases, but all are being studied to try and regulate these B cells so they don't attack abnormally. Many people have described the way that these work as not taking the general out of the groove, but rather reprogramming the general to have a different function. And when approved, we hope that these will be once-a-day oral pills. We're doing dose finding trials for these as well. Moving on to the last piece, we've talked about kind of the immune system, how we're diagnosing and what it's leading to. It's what can you do for yourself? So I know I belabored this a little bit last year, but it was stressed again at the meeting we just returned from how important exercise is for long-term function in MS patients. I can't tell you the countless times in clinic where I've seen an MRI and I expect the patient to be more disabled when they walk in after looking at their MRI, but the patient comes in, they're physically active, they're very, very fit, and it makes a large difference in how they do in regards to their MS. The exercise trials, are showing that exercising 30 minutes 3 times a week and getting that heart rate up has been shown to increase brain-derived growth factor and neurotrophic growth factor, and that in doing that allow for repathing of the nervous system so that if you have a plaque, you're able to kind of rewire and get past that plaque and have better overall function and less disability. It also leads to things that are important here, right, with stress management and overall mental health. This is the diagram that actually shows the brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor increase in those that exercise versus those that don't. So it's kind of exciting to know that you're not only doing it to be generally healthy during these times, but you're also trying to promote overall MS health and the ability to recover from relapses and recover from damage because you're remapping in essence. Moving on to Erica, we're going to talk about what's occurred in 2021 as far as hot topics.
So it's 2021, and the big question that we've been getting a lot is, what have we learned about COVID-19 and MS so far? I was at NYU when COVID hit in the middle of the city, and we were all terrified as clinicians and patients about what was going on with COVID and what was the risk of getting COVID with MS, on MS medications, and where do we go from here? During that time, a lot of these doctors, these neurologists got together and they started collecting information to figure out what the true risk of COVID-19 in our patient population was. And one of the groups that did this was actually sponsored by the National MS Society. It's the COVID-MS Registry, where clinicians collect patient information of MS patients who've gotten COVID-19. And we are trying to figure out, how do MS patients fare with COVID-19 infection, and does disease-modifying therapy affect the outcomes? Some of the information in this registry included things like age, gender, race, ethnicity, other diagnoses that we know put people at risk for COVID-19, such as high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, etc. The type of MS, the disease duration, and mobility status. Is the patient walking? Are they in a wheelchair? Do they need to use a cane? We also collected things like MS treatments and the overall outcomes. Were these patients hospitalized? Did they end up on a ventilator? Were they in the ICU? Did they die? And more recently, they've added the vaccination status so that we can try to see what happens in these patients that have been vaccinated. Do they have similar outcomes to other vaccinated patients? The data so far, as of October 2021, 3,400 patients have been registered. So these are MS patients, some of them on therapy, some of them not, who had COVID-19. 81% of this group has relapsed and remitting MS, and 15% have progressive MS. 77% are fully ambulatory, and 13% walk with assistance, such as a cane or a rollator. 8% are either wheelchair bound or bed bound. looking at the results from what they found so far, the age, for every 10 years of age that you have, the risk of death from COVID-19 seems to increase further. So age is a really big risk factor for COVID-19. Male gender, men are about 2.5 times more likely to have a poor outcome compared to females. And race, African Americans and Black ethnicity have been shown to have a higher rate of hospitalization or ending up on a ventilator. The ambulatory status was a very, very important one. And it's something that we've seen in all these databases that, being wheelchair bound, having difficulty walking seems to also impair a higher risk of mortality or risk of complications. But with all that doom and gloom, what we also found out was that overall 90% of patients were not hospitalized, which is a good thing. None of the registries have shown any particular DMT to increase the risk of death from COVID-19. There may be some medications that may put you at a higher risk of getting that infection, but we don't quite have enough information yet to draw a concrete conclusion on that risk. Other COVID MS findings, we do know that COVID-19 can worsen MS symptoms, particularly those chronic symptoms that seem to come up with any type of infection. Several registries, so one's here in North America, one's in Europe, one's all over the world, they've shown that higher risk of complications with COVID-19 when there's more comorbidities, that male gender, and other physical disabilities. If a patient has risk factors for complications, it's very strongly recommended that they consider getting vaccinated. Vaccinations and disease-modifying therapy. COVID vaccines are safe for patients with MS, including patients that are on disease-modifying therapies. Certain DMTs seem to have kind of they can impair your body's ability to create antibodies to vaccines. And so because of this, you can have a reduced efficacy of those vaccinations. It's very important that you talk with your neurologist about when you get your vaccines, because the timing may play a big role in your body's ability to build up a good immune response, good healthy immune response to that vaccine. Vaccines in general stimulate two parts of the immune system. They produce antibodies, as Dr. Appleby mentioned earlier, but they can also produce what's called memory T cells or memory B cells. This is a cellular response. Recent work has shown that even though certain disease-modifying therapies might prevent the body from producing large amounts of antibodies, there may be an increase in that cellular response. That cellular response is very difficult to measure. You can't just go to LabCorp Quest and have your blood checked for it. It's something that really is only done in a research lab. So patients often ask, should we get tested for COVID antibodies? And I often tell them, no, it's not necessarily going to show us whether or not you're protected. Your body has more than one way to protect you from the things you've been vaccinated against. So some other hot topics in MS research. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I want to go over a few things. Some things that have been talked about at the recent conferences is changing the way we think about treatment. There's been some research looking at extending the dosing intervals of certain medications to reduce the risk of PML. During the pandemic, there was a lot of research looking at kind of extending the interval of these anti-CD20 infusion medications. In a lot of places, the infusions were stopped, and so patients had to go a little bit longer in between infusions. And so we're gathering data on whether or not that's a good idea or a bad idea and what the outcomes of that were. The other questions that are being asked is, can certain DMTs change the long-term outcome? There's some data looking at these two populations of cells. We have the cells that are causing fights, and we have the cells that are breaking up fights. And there's some data that after using certain medications for a prolonged period of time, those cells that are breaking up the fights may be outnumbering the ones that are causing them in the first place, which would be really good for MS. There's ongoing studies looking at how long we need to treat people for MS. A current trial called the DISCO trial, sounds really fun. They're looking at the discontinuation of disease-modifying therapy in MS, and they're randomizing people who've been clinically stable over the age of 55 to either stop treatment or continue on treatment with routine MRIs in between. We're hoping to figure out what is that time period where we can stop therapy and the risk of relapse is so low that we don't have to worry about new lesions coming up on MRI. There's also 3 studies going on right now looking at what's the best treatment for MS and me, like which which treatment is right. Should we start with an injectable? Should we start with a pill? Should we start with an infusion? Nobody really knows the answer. So these 3 studies, Treat MS, Deliver MS, and Combat MS, are all trying to answer that question. Which medication, now that we have over 20, which one is the right one to start with? There's also some work, a lot of work that's been going on looking at the microbiome in MS. Microbiome is just a fancy word for poop. People are looking at the composition of different bacteria in the gut to see whether or not some of that bacteria, healthy bacteria or bad bacteria, might be causing the immune system to get all revved up and causing things like MS to happen in the first place, or the other way around, maybe that bad bacteria might be causing flare-ups or relapses and that sort of thing. They've been studying this for a while, and it's been pretty messy, no pun intended, but hopefully in the next few years, we'll start to get some more information on what diet and what bacteria have to do with MS and our immune systems. There's a lot of work as well going into remyelination and regeneration. I think this is part that we've all kind of been really looking forward to or hopeful for, not just something to stop relapses from happening in the first place, but something to repair the damage that's already there. They're looking at many different medications, from antihistamines to some old antibiotics, to see if they might help promote remyelination. There's also work, as Dr. Appleby mentioned, looking at the role of exercise and cognitive therapy on neuroplasticity, just a big fancy word for, kind of that resilience, your body's ability to kind of repair or kind of, what am I looking for? Kind of regenerate and push through whatever damage has occurred. There's a lot of studies going on with stem cells. We don't have any locally, but we're trying to figure out, is there a way to program cells to signal your body to repair itself, repair that myelin and kind of improve things. The other thing that we're looking at is finding the trigger for MS in the first place. For over 20 years, people have been looking at the Epstein-Barr virus, the virus that causes mono, and they've been trying to figure out if it might be a cause of MS. The data seems to be suggesting that it may be playing a role in the B cell morphology and what happens to those B cells after they're exposed to this virus. So there's a lot going on there, looking at maybe the use of antiviral medications, and maybe even a vaccine to see if we can prevent MS from starting in the first place. Lastly, we're looking at biomarkers for MS. Is there a blood test or a genetic test or some other way to know if a patient has MS? Currently, MS is a clinical diagnosis based on clinical criteria and supportive things like MRI and lumbar punctures to kind of figure out if somebody has the disease or not. There's a lot of work looking at other molecules such as GFAP or neurofilament light chain, little pieces of protein that are produced by neural cells to see whether or not a patient may have the disease or if they may be at risk of a relapse, if something is active. There's a lot of work going into that. So we have a lot that we're still waiting for, but there's some great things on the horizon, and we're hopeful that next time we see you, we'll be able to tell you more about all those things.
Thank you so much to Doctors Appleby and Parada. I know I learned a ton. We hope you stuck around to learn all of the information that they had to offer. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Here's a final look at our donation totals. We are up over that $10,000 mark that we had hoped to hit today. But this window is going to stay open actually until Monday. So please continue to donate. You can text 2021 WAMS to 76278. You can also go to the Give Smart page. That will stay open until Monday. Our purse auction will also stay open until Monday. So go bid on those purses and let's help get that number up and away much higher than that $10,000 mark we hoped. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you to those of you who have donated today to help us hit our mark. Again, we hope to reach even higher by Monday, and we hope to see you back next year in person for our newly named Together for a Cure Upstate New York event. Let's eradicate MS together. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see you next year.
right, everybody, that's a wrap. Well done. Thank you. Oh, it's much more than Zoom. There's a lot going on over here. Thank you guys for coming in and making our jobs easy by just rolling with the punches and being professionals. That's never